Ignition running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Good evening. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson, and it's Friday here at Atlanta's Evening News on WSB. The phone number is 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. I want to begin with this emergency declaration nonsense and whether or not it actually happens. And I do, by the way, I intentionally do use nonsense. I'm not trying to be flippant here. There are real problems with the president's use of a declaration of emergency. The first thing you need to understand about with a declaration of emergency is that it really is more of a creative way to surrender so that the president can blame judges. In fact, people on Capitol Hill and in the White House are saying this as much, that if the president reopens the government and declares an emergency to fund the border wall, what's actually happening is the president and his team know that federal judges will issue an injunction and prohibit him from doing what he wants to do, and then he can blame the judges and reopen the government. So the government gets reopened and the president doesn't get his wall. Another issue with the emergency declaration is there are a lot of armchair pundits out there saying who would have standing, who would have standing. Well, if you actually read the National Emergencies Act, it was written in 1976. It was signed by Gerald Ford. It's not clear that the president could use a declaration of emergency and mobilize soldiers to build a wall in the United States. That's one of the things being floated. The reason for this is because there are statutes that prohibit the use of soldiers on American soil, except in very limited cases that have to do not with national emergencies, but with times of war. If the president is summoning the National Guard to do something like that, there's problems. Now, there's a difference between actually just defending the border, as the president summoned National Guard troops to do and sent them to the border before the election, and actually physically building structures across private property in the United States, which is what would be proposed. Very problematic legally for the president to be able to do this. Farmers would have standing to sue if their land was being taken or there was an ingress and egress by soldiers on their property. States would be able to sue if the president was declaring a national emergency in their areas. And now one of the issues being floated is that the president could reassign emergency money allocated for natural disasters in Florida, Georgia, Texas, and California and direct that money to be built on the border. The states would have standing to sue on that issue. Lots of people would have standing to oppose this in court. It would get dragged out even if the president were potentially successful. It could stretch beyond 6 years so he could go through another term, finish off this term, and have another president still dealing with the issue. And if that president's a Democrat, kill it. Another issue here is the precedent that would be set. You know, presidents of the United States follow precedents going all the way back to George Washington. Still, to this day, presidents use precedents set by George Washington. The reason Bob Mueller is having a hard time getting the president to testify and possibly even charging the president is because there are a series of presidents' administrations and justice departments and White House counsels who have set precedent that a sitting president cannot be charged with a crime. That's why Mueller is having to move so cautiously. These precedents matter. If the president were to declare a precedent by declaring an emergency and spending money, all presidents have declared emergencies under the National Emergencies Act. Barack Obama declared them. Donald Trump has declared them. George W. Bush declared them. Bill Clinton declared them. Every president has declared emergencies. What sets Donald Trump's emergency apart is that if you look at all the prior emergencies, short of natural disaster emergencies, all of the emergencies deal with foreign affairs or national security issues, not a wall, and they don't reallocate or reprogram federal tax dollars to spend domestically. They deal with putting holds on other people and making it harder for people to do business. This would be a very unique emergency declaration in that the president is declaring a national security emergency with money to be spent domestically on a purpose that Congress has refrained specifically from spending. On top of that, another thing that would make the emergency very unique is that this is an emergency that has been dealt with by prior presidents, and the situation has arguably improved over time, and we've never had a president declaring something an emergency when the trend line suggests it's been improving. As a matter of fact, illegal immigration is down. Cross-border drug trading is down. All of these things, it's still high, still higher than I want. This is why I support a physical wall. But the data does not suggest it's classified as an emergency when the situation year over year has improved. All of these things suggest if the president is doing this, it's not a conservative option. On top of that, it's an option that expands the power of the government to spend money and sets precedents for future progressive presidents. That's not a wise thing for President Trump to do. But beyond all of that, if you really, really, really want a wall, and I do, that's why I support the government shutdown. That's why I think the president should continue the government shutdown until the Democrats compromise. Then the issue here is that declaring a national emergency, reopening the government, and then using the emergency to reprogram tax dollars to build the wall, you're not going to get the wall. A federal judge is going to stop President Trump if he does this. Farmers will sue for the government taking their land. States will sue for the reprogrammed dollars. States will sue for the president declaring a national emergency and summoning National Guard troops or putting soldiers on private land to build the wall. Lots of people are going to sue and keep this tied up in court. If the president does the national emergency route, what he's doing is he's surrendering and doing so creatively enough to find someone else to blame. You know and I know that most of the president's supporters, if he does this, they're going to rush out. They're going to blame the federal courts. They're going to totally ignore the fact that everyone has said this. Courts are going to stop this. There is a way for the president to get his wall built. The national emergency declaration is not the way to do it. I'll tell you the way to do it after we check with Mark McKay on Saturday.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon. It's 4:14, and we have a travel advisory out through DeKalb County. Surprise, surprise, on I-285. WSB Jam Cam showing two right lanes still knocked out. Injury crash, outer loop, 285 northbound, north of Flash Hills Road, exit 48. Now the heavy delays set in at I-675. Slow as usual for a Friday afternoon out of Sandy Springs down to the Stone Mountain Freeway and beyond at Memorial Drive on the inner loop. Outer loop out of Sandy Springs is slow. 400 all the way down the west side perimeter. And we'll watch the impact on a crash. I-85 southbound in the center lane involving a big rig at exit 66. That's in Union City. We'll see that traffic stack up quickly back at the I-285 interchange. Eric.
Thank you very much. So what does the president do to fund the wall? A national emergency declaration isn't going to get it done. So what does he do? Well, see through the shutdown. It is painful, and the media is in the pocket of the Democrats. The media is in a situation where they're pushing the Democratic talking points, and they're highlighting all the tragedies. They're highlighting people who lose their employment benefits because they're federal employees in ways they would never highlight the tragedies of people being killed by illegal immigrants. But keep it going. Democrats, if you were listening to the first hour of Sean Hannity's show, Democratic congressmen are talking about the phone calls into their offices are overwhelmingly in favor of building the wall. Keep it going. Keep it going. At some point, Democrats realize they have to reopen the government. And the president can hop a plane and he can barnstorm the country, going to the congressional districts of these newly elected Democrats who beat Republicans in areas that Republicans tend to hold, and point out that he's willing to compromise on the issue. Even if it's to upgrade existing walls and add Border Patrol agents, he's willing to compromise on the issue. But he wants to at least make upgrades on the walls, if not expand the wall. And show that Nancy Pelosi's the one who's unreasonably failing to compromise. Show the public that Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats are the ones saying no, 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 no. Show the public that Nancy Pelosi is being unreasonable. Bypass the national media. Go straight to the voters. Go to the voters on the campaign trail. Go to the voters through local media that tends to be more conservative than the national media. Go sit with local reporters in areas where there have been influxes of illegal immigration and give them the actual stats, give them the actual data. Make the case on local media around the country. Push through on that, Mr. President. And you can win the shutdown fight. You can get your wall. But going the national emergency route isn't going to do it. It's going to get a federal judge to tell you no. It's going to tie it up in litigation. It's going to give you someone to blame for surrendering so that you don't have to take blame for surrendering. But it's what you're doing is you'll be surrendering. You'll be walking away from ever getting a wall. And that's something the president's supporters need to understand. If the president declares a national emergency and reopens the federal government and then reprograms money saying we've got an emergency, I'm going to move money around in the budget to build the wall. That building of the wall, it's never going to happen. The only way at this point for the wall to be built is to win the shutdown fight, not surrender the shutdown fight. And the only way to win the shutdown fight is to get an Air Force One and fly around the country and start making the case to voters in these swing districts that the Democrats are being unreasonable, the Democrats are refusing to compromise, the Democrats are the ones who don't want to secure the border, the Democrats instead want to get rid of ICE. In fact, if I were the president, I would bring up Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who went on CNBC, along with other Democrats who said they want to get rid of ICE. Make that the case. The reason the Democrats don't want to fund the borders, they want to get rid of border enforcement altogether. Make that case around the country. The president and his team are doing a terrible job. The media is out to get them. The media is on the side of the Democrats. And the one thing the president can do is go above and beyond all of them. Go to local reporters in local areas and local voters. And they're not doing that. They need to do that. A national emergency would be a surrender. And the president's team knows it. And in addition to it being a surrender, it would be a terrible precedent set for other presidents. You know the difference between climate change and illegal immigration? The Pentagon has declared climate change a national security issue. The ground is already laid for a national emergency there in a way that illegal immigration isn't. And for all of you who are saying, well, the Democrats are going to do it anyway, well, first of all, that's an elementary school playground argument. But Barack Obama never did this. Never did this. Barack Obama did a lot of things unilaterally, and even Barack Obama didn't think he could do an emergency order on stuff like this. You're paving the way with bad precedent, and the future Democrat will take advantage of it if you do. But you know what? If the president does all of this blustering, saying, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, and then comes out and says, you know what? Turns out I don't have the power to do it as president, well, then he's solidly establishing a precedent that future presidents, including progressive ones, won't be able to ignore. Oh, hey, I got the speaker routed wrong. Look at that. Listen to this.
WSB Traffic every 6 minutes begins at 4 o'clock every